In school, many of us learned that when a government simply prints more money as a response to countrywide economic hardship, it can actually make the problem worse by causing a phenomenon known as inflation. In an inflated economy, the baseline prices for goods and services have risen due to an increased amount of money in circulation, a jump in production costs, or even an increased demand for products. The costs keep rising until consumers can no longer pay the prices and economic hardship worsens. With the recent record-breaking U.S. stimulus packages distributed over the past year as a response to the COVID-19 pandemic, many worry that the country is headed for a state of inflation. But experts say this may not actually be the case. Today, we will be looking at how printing trillions of dollars may or may not cause U.S. inflation, and giving you everything you need to know. But before we get into the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel with notifications on so you don't miss any of the new videos we post. First, where are these concerns coming from? The United States Federal Reserve, which is the central banking agency of the U.S., increased its balance sheet from $4 trillion before the start of the pandemic to a staggering $7 trillion, largely due to multiple rounds of stimulus funding. That's an incredible amount of money going into the economy. Whenever that much money enters circulation, it usually signals inflation fears as the prices of goods begin to rise. However, the Federal Reserve is the agency in charge of moderating the economy to protect against inflation, and financial experts believe that the influx of money into circulation might not actually cause an inflated economy due to a system of checks and balances in place. Basically, the Federal Reserve knows what it's doing. The first check is for the increased cost of supplies. As you can imagine, the cost of supplies heavily influences the ultimate cost of the goods. If the supplies to make the item increase in price, then all the products made with that item will have to show a corresponding price increase in order for the manufacturer to still make the same amount of profit. Because the pandemic has caused heavy disruptions to the supply side of the economy, as a result, certain prices have been increasing and fluctuating rapidly in recent months. But financial experts have told us not to worry just yet. These higher prices in a time where money is tight for many will provide a hard hit to demand that will force prices back down. Second, there is a weaker demand for goods. Just like how a weak demand will help to balance out inflation in supply prices, a weak demand also balances inflation across the entire economic market. Market analysis has shown that when there is less demand for goods and services, meaning that consumers are not as likely to spend their money on things, these effects are seen in decreased prices across the market. Often, increased money in circulation results in higher prices because there is an increased demand as people have more money available. But the financial impacts of the pandemic are still being felt despite the stimulus packages, which means that people are not motivated to buy and prices stay low. Thirdly, it seems that economics isn't what it used to be. The economy's response to the pandemic has shown experts that several of the trends that were previously hard and fast rules haven't held true in these unprecedented times. And maybe that's a good thing, at least where inflation is concerned. Inflation is based on the idea that money creation is linked directly to consumer prices, and increased money printing will directly increase prices. However, the modernization of the economy might have weakened this link, and this likely isn't a new development either, as the financial crisis of 2008 resulted in increased money creation that did not result in higher prices. Number 4, globalization. Another check to the predicted impending inflation in the modern world is exactly that, the modern world. Before globalization, a country's finances would be incredibly unstable at times, as they were entirely dependent on the motions of the economic system within the country. However, in today's globalized world full of modern technology, goods and services are often outsourced cheaply, meaning that the economy as a whole is impacted more by global changes. And while this can be a bad thing for the moment, it appears that the global economy is helping to stabilize and work against inflation, as it is driving the cost of goods down and keeping prices low in spite of the stimulus packages. This could mean more money for us to spend on cheaper goods. 5. Technology. You might be wondering what increasing technology has to do with the economy, but the answer is so much. As we've seen, the primary check to a large amount of inflation is keeping the ultimate cost of goods low due to lowered production costs and decreased demand. Technology has helped streamline production, thus lowering prices by dramatically dramatically cutting manufacturing costs. Additionally, technology has eliminated the need for several pricier items that used to be necessary for most people, such as scanners, cameras, music players, and many more. Now we can do all these things on a phone that fits in our pocket and no longer need to buy a specific device for each function. Next, a little inflation is actually a good thing. I know, it sounds crazy after having just told you how we are trying to avoid inflation. But in a catch-22 of sorts, a little inflation can actually help to stop a bigger hyperinflation episode down the road. A little inflation encourages people to spend their money now rather than wait until later when prices could be even higher, and invest their money while there's a chance for higher payoffs down the road. This grows the economy and provides stimulation for the stock market, currency value, and the economy. Of course, the goal is that the small amount of inflation will ebb and flow and never go above a certain level. The point is that some inflation can be a good indicator of a healthy market. Essentially, what's one way to prevent big inflation? Just a little inflation. Number 7, money in the system doesn't mean money for consumers. As experts witnessed with the Federal Reserve's response to the 2008 financial crisis, increasing the amount of money in the economy does not always directly translate to money in the hands of us, the consumers. So where is it going if it's not going into our pockets? And the answer is in the banks. The feds usually put money into the economy by buying bonds and assets from smaller banks, which the banks then keep to lend out to people. However, when inflation is imminent, many banks keep the money in the system, so to speak, as a way to increase their reserves to lend to customers. And before you ask why the banks are keeping the money from us, know that it's this very action that likely checks inflation while still allowing the economy to grow under the benefits of a federal stimulus. So really, it's the best of both worlds. 8. An older population drives down prices. As a result of longer lifespans and the aging baby boomer generation, demographically the population is getting older. Experts have found that having an older population affects the economy by driving down prices, as older people tend to save more of their money and spend even less, especially as their incomes and retirement funds shrink. This results in an overall decreased demand for items, as sales are generally driven by the young people of a society. And when there are fewer younger people, there is less demand. And while this may not seem like much, it likely helps to counteract the effects of inflation in an economy like ours, affected by large amounts of money production. So thank you, old people. 9. The Federal Reserve isn't printing as much as you think. One of the important things to understand is that although the Reserve does control the amount of money in circulation, it's not just printing limitless dollar bills and throwing them at consumers. Although stimulus packages put money directly into the hands of consumers, much of the financial stabilizing the Reserve has done is through purchasing assets of smaller banks. As we mentioned earlier, this helps to control the economy at the same time that it stimulates it, encouraging that money doesn't just flood into circulation and trigger inflation. Lastly, if inflation happens, where is it going to be? Although it appears that experts are doubtful that market and nationwide inflation will occur, they do say that there are some markets that might not be immune to the checks and balances that have been put into place. The good news for you is that most consumer prices will likely remain fairly close to where they are now, so don't adjust your budgets just yet. However, in the coming months, experts expect to see slight jumps in inflated stock, housing, and asset prices. But luckily, your regular trips to the grocery store should remain largely unaffected or see only moderate fluctuations as the effects to the stimulus inputs balance out. So will there or will there not be inflation? At this point, you might be thinking to yourself, okay, so you've given me reasons why there may be inflation, but you've also told me several reasons why there may not be any at all. So which is it? And the unfortunate answer is that despite all the checks and balances that exist in the economy, and despite all of the incredibly qualified professionals carefully analyzing the market around the clock, at the end of the day, nobody knows what will actually happen. The economy is a delicate system that operates like wildly unpredictable gears in a clock. A single gear could change at a moment's notice and drastically impact the whole system. So although experts predict that the trillions of dollars inputted into the economy will likely not cause the massive inflation that many fear, the truth is that the only way to know for certain is to wait and see how it plays out. And although that may be unsatisfactory, nothing in life is predictable or certain, least of all the economy and the stock market. And that puts a wrap on this video. Thanks for watching.